Hi everyone, welcome to Masculinities and People of Colour. I don't often like that term, POC, but as for reference purposes for this particular debate, topic, sharing, conversation, I'm going to be joined by Lorraine Henry King, and also we would also be joined by Samson Soboye. Samson's not with us at the moment, but he will be joining the conversation a little bit later. Basic housekeeping. My name is Harris Elliott. I'm a senior lecturer in identity, culture, and fashion at Central St. Martin's. I'm a black man of light-skinned complexion. I'm wearing a beret and a red V-necked jumper. I'd like to hand over so that Lorraine can introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Henry King. I am a senior academic support lecturer at London College of Fashion and also work in the Cultural and Historical Studies department. And I'm a light-skinned black woman with long blonde locks. I'm wearing shaded glasses and a white top.
Excellent. Really pleased to be having this conversation with yourself, Lorraine. We met each other a few years ago, almost doing a similar type conversation. So it's really great to be able to pick up the thread today and to be able to hear your sharing and your topic, of which I was able to glimpse your slides earlier, which look amazing and very impactful. I'd love if you'd be able to open the floor, and then if Samson's able to join, then we can flow into Samson and then myself, or vice versa. Yeah, so really great to have you here as part of the summit. So yeah, share away.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be working with you. I mean, you have a rich and diverse background of your own. Maybe you should tell us a little bit about you first.
Okay, if we're going to go there. So thank you. So yes, I'm here as an academic at Central St. Martin's and predating and still ongoing with my practice. I'm a cultural curator and visual storyteller. I work in not only the academic space, but from my professional practice, I work with a number of musicians and art galleries. And essentially, my practice is about sharing different intergenerational stories about culture and identity. And there's a cross-pollination within that. And very often, my go-to points in terms of my referencing held back to my heritage, which is Jamaican, and then my second spiritual home, which is Japan. And so often my reference points at some point either converge with Jamaican attitude or Japanese sensibilities in the way that I think about the projects that I do, but very much rooted in identity, culture, and identity is a word that I would use to describe how I would describe fashion.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much that you could be sharing. So I'm sure we'll get to hear a bit more about that later.
Snippets, yeah.
Snippets later.
Yeah.
Well, I'm here today to talk about the research that I'm doing, which is based around heroic black skin. Now, clearly, we've got the title today, People of Colour, as well. And even though I do look at black and brown skin within my practice, what I'm going to be talking about today is specifically around heroic black skin in particular. Okay. And somewhere the slides are, let's have a look, seem to have disappeared slightly. So whilst that opened, one of the things that I can say is that I'm also a practitioner. My practice is based around textiles and multimedia interrogations. So whilst I'm not talking too much about my practice today, I'm talking more about the theory behind it. Hopefully I'll be able to kind of mention where the practice sits. Now, Harrison, are you able to see my slide?
Jessica's able to see the slides.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll move ahead. So as you can see, it says Black Skin as Costume, the heroic skin of Hollywood's black superheroes. And what I've been doing is I've been looking at Well, I was asking many questions at the beginning of my research, and some of the questions that I was asking were based around what we see when we're watching Hollywood action films. Now, Hollywood action films, when I was looking at them as I was growing up, it was the time when there were hardly any black actors on screen. So as I was growing up, and as I started to study my first degree in film, I started to question, where are the black action heroes? Where are the black actors? Where are the heroes that are black? And remember that 10, 20 years ago, we're looking at and still sometimes see the fact that the black actor in the film always dies first. So why does the black actor die first? These were some of the questions that I was asking myself at the beginning of the research. And then I thought, do you know what? Is it just me that's noticing this? But actually, as a black community, we were noticing the way that black roles were portrayed, how black men were portrayed in film. So I'm asking, not just was it me being oversensitive at the time, but what would it look like if we actually had a hero who could save the world, an action hero who could defeat the bad guy, an action hero that was able to use his body and his mind and actually defeat enemies of all sorts? What would it look like if that action hero happened to be black? So what I had started to find when I started to look at this research, when I was in search of a hero, in search of a black action hero, what I started to see was that there were different genres of film, clearly. I was looking at action films. And what I was noticing is that you would see the same thing, meaning, as this slide shows, gangsters, for instance. You would see the same thing, gangsters, portrayed differently if they were black gangsters, and completely differently again if they were white gangsters. So black gangsters tended to be portrayed as kind of hood, lowly, low-life criminals. White gangsters tended to be portrayed as elite, as cool, as well-dressed, as sophisticated, as intelligent, intellectual. Now, they were they were definitely gruesome, they were definitely ruthless, but the way that they were portrayed was cool, in the way that they were dressed, the way that they were suited, the way that they were booted, the way that the cars that they drove, all of that. So even though we're looking at something where the context and the subject are the same, they were treated very differently when the actors were black than when they were white. And what I started to notice was that whenever there was a black man within an action film or a film of any sort, he tended to be in a very lowly position. He tended to be the stand-in, he tended to be the buddy, he tended to be he had lots of roles, but they weren't starring roles. And part of my research then was to look at, well, what are the roles that black actors have, and why am I seeing very little development or areas where they could really shine? So as I was looking at films, I noticed that there were certain roles that I was seeing repeated over and over again. The first one was, as you can see in the on screen here, there are three roles: Toms, Coons, and Bucks. Now, this terminology comes from a very well-known film scholar who's called Donald Bogle, and he talks about black actors within Hollywood, and he talks about the fact that there are only 5 roles available to black actors, and for black men, these are the 3 that we would see over and over again in film. Now, Donald Bogle wrote this book in the 1970s. It's on its 5th edition now, which was published in 2016. And in 2016, even though he was adding new films, and of course he's got in Will Smith and Denzel Washington, Idris Elba, he's got in Michael B. Jordan, he's got in all the stars that we know now. what he's saying is that even though we have what looks very different from in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, even though the roles may look different, he says at their very essence, they come back down to these three main roles. So the Toms would be the Tom is somebody who is subservient, who is really about making sure that the white family he serves, he puts their needs in front of his own all the time. And an example of that that always springs to mind for me would be Man on Fire with Denzel Washington. And that's because Denzel Washington moves heaven and earth to save a little girl, a little white girl. And that's the type of role that, at its heart, heroic as it looks, sits within the Tom's category. So the second role is coons, and they're kind of comedic, childlike, can't be trusted, will shy away from work at any opportunity. So there's that type of childish, they have to be looked after and watched carefully type of vibe about them. But it also means that they can be comedians or buffoons, or they've got that kind of comic trait to them. And then the last one, as we can see by the clip here from Roots, is referred to as the buck. So this is a strong black man who is rapacious, he's dangerous, he is untrustworthy and uncontrollable. So clearly, in times of slavery, all of these physical strengths were desirable, but they're difficult to control. So when I started to see these traits coming through in the films that I was looking at, my question was, why? Why does this even exist? How is this still even a thing at the moment? And when you're researching and something keeps coming up over and over and over again, the rule is that you go back to the source. So I was being told by Bogle and many other academics that the source of these roles came from a film called Birth of a Nation. So Birth of a Nation is a historical love story where the Ku Klux Klan are the saviors who ride in and save a whole town from these freed slaves who are running riot in the town, trying to marry out of their class and out of their race. They're taking over the law courts. They're running wild. And the heroine of the film actually throws herself off a cliff in an effort to make sure that she isn't raped or ravished by one of these freed slaves. And the whole premise of the piece is that the Ku Klux Klan ride in and save the town. Now, my first degree is in film production. And when I was taught this film, I was not taught anything about its racist, I can't even say undertones or overtones because it's blatantly racist. I was told nothing about that. I was told nothing about the riots. I was told nothing about the protests. I was told nothing about the it being banned or anything like that. What I was told about was that D.W. Griffith, who was the producer of the film, the director of the film, what I was told in my film degree is that he was the godfather of film. And he was the godfather of film because he created virtually all of the screen grammar that we see today in our action films. When you see an army or people running in towards each other from one direction and another army running in and their film going in the other direction, that's part of the grammar that he established. Lots of the shots that we are using in action films, over the shoulder shots and how it's choreographed and how it's put together, all were born in this film. But also born in Birth of a Nation was all of the really awful stereotypes that we're still living with. So that's key to why I had to keep going back to Birth of a Nation. And in going back to Birth of a Nation, I was able to see the beginning of a few things. So first of all, in Birth of a Nation, you see the birth of the bulletproof hero, you see the birth of the action hero, you see the birth of the buck, the big black dangerous buck, and a few other things. So it's quite important. The film is quite important, but the film was actually released in 1915. And it was the first film, the first blockbuster in Hollywood. It lasted 3 hours at a time when films were 10 or 15 minutes long. So there were queues to see this film. It was Hollywood's first blockbuster. But along with that came the whole stigma of the riots and protests that came with it. The racism in it and the promotion of the Ku Klux Klan were all part of the issue that made it very difficult to be played in the United States, even now, over 100 years later. So when I was doing my research, clearly, even though I had to go back to Birth of a Nation, I'm looking forward to the challenges of how to find a Black hero and superhero. And looking at the pictures of Blade and looking at the pictures of Hancock, I was looking to challenge the notion of white supremacy as being normal. And we need Black heroes for that to happen. So part of what I have been doing with my research, because I began my research before Netflix had Luke Cage or Black Lightning, I began my research before Black Panther came to screen. And Black Panther was really useful for my research, but it doesn't quite do what I'm looking for in my research. But the whole idea was that Black Panther opened a conversation about what it was like to have heroes on screen. What did it mean to not just the Black population to see Black heroes, but what does it mean for white children and what does it mean for culture in general? Because if you are told, or if you do not see heroic Black roles on screen, clearly the message, the undertone of that is Black people aren't heroes. And that's what my research is challenging. And the way that I'm looking at that is I'm looking really at Black skin and thinking, okay, when we as costume practitioners, because I'm sitting in my costume design space when I'm looking at this research, when I'm thinking about costume design, skin as costume is a really big area of research. When we say skin as costume, the practitioners usually mean projecting images onto the skin. They might mean prosthetics, lacerations, they might mean painting of skin, everything that you could do with skin that kind of helps to build character. However, costume practitioners, when they're talking about skin as costume, actually mean white skin as costume. So whiteness sits invisibly within that. So we have this connection then in film about heroes being connected to whiteness. So white skin equals heroes. And part of what I'm researching is how we might challenge that, how we might introduce Black heroes so that everyone has a much fairer, representative sample around them to grow up with. So looking at costume, just to kind of think about how I think about costume, according to Monk, is described as a body that can be taken off. Okay, so Monk is talking about costuming the body, putting things on top of the body, but also something that can be taken off. So for me, I'm thinking about Black skin as costume. And the reason I'm defining it that way is because I'm trying to point out to people the systemic racism, the inequity, and the bias that's perpetrated on Black skin. Now, if I describe Black skin as costume, that is problematic for Black practitioners and Black creatives. In fact, it should be problematic for everybody.
Lorraine, you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, it just did its own thing. So what I'm saying is Black skin is treated like a costume in many ways. And that means that when an actor is looking to play a role, often people will say to them, it's not appropriate for a Black actor. So what do they mean by that? That's because in my research, what I'm seeing is that they're reading into Black skin a whole heap of things that have nothing to do with the actor's talent or the actor's ability. What they're actually saying is that the practice and the custom of society is that we only see Black people in these particular roles. And really, as part of FACE, we are here to challenge and to open people's eyes, really, to the not just to the different things that we can do, because clearly we're all talented, but to make it normal for Black people to be included in everything and part of everything. So just to finish off, the reason that Idris Elba is there on this shot is because Idris Elba is one of the actors who has, when he's working, a skin clause, meaning he shows his skin very rarely and only in certain circumstances. And that's because that 100-year-old film, Birth of a Nation, frames his Black skin as if he is an animalistic buck. And in making sure he is received in the right way and perceived in the right way, him and Denzel Washington and quite a few of the other Black actors enact this skin clause so that the audience can take them seriously. And I think it's about time that the audience understood what was going on. And we as an audience were able to make a choice about how Black masculinity and people of colour are shown in their true light on screen. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. That was very powerful. Yeah, some shocking films and references. Not well, yeah, no, they are shocking. Heinous, Birth of a Nation. But yeah, thank you for sharing, and it'd be good to try and pick up on this a little bit later on if we have a chance. But yeah, really fascinating, the thread and the lineage and the connections that you've made. So continuing our brilliant discussion, we have the esteemed Samson Soboye, who will be now introducing himself and his response to the subject matter, looking into his practice. Over to you, Samson. Please introduce yourself and tell us about your work.
Hi everyone, Samson Soboye. I'm a fashion stylist, designer, educator, and man about town. I work in the fashion arena. I studied at St Martin's years ago. I opened up a shop in Calvert Avenue, Shoreditch, when Shoreditch was nothing. The shop is called Soboye, and we opened in 2002, so that's 20 years now. Of doing it at the high level of what I'm doing it in. So welcome everybody. Thank you for bearing up, and excuse my lack of technology skills, but we're going to go through this. And thank you, Jessica, for hosting. So I've entitled my journey 80% perspiration, 20% inspiration. There's lots of inspiration that you do get, but there's a lot of sweat that goes into it to make something happen, as you well know, Harris. And in that, we're talking about the realities of surviving in a small fashion business as a Black man in a small London melting pot, trying to make something happen with very little support. So next slide. By the way, that's my print that I've designed for a new print that I'm doing. So it's got my logo in it somewhere, which you can see very closely in one of those feathers. Next slide. So I've been running my fashion business, that's in my timeline, since 2002. In 2005, I opened a shop in Covent Garden, which was the former shop called Code Samiri. It's now dry cleaners, I think. I had it there for 2 years, and then I took sole ownership of Soboye, which was originally Soboye Sung, which was opened up with Eason Sung, who was the right-hand woman to Oswald Boateng. So we were really good friends. I'd use his stuff for shoots, and then I started Soboye, the fashion line, in 2012, which was a celebration of the African nations taking part in the London Olympics. So that was a really good starting point. And it was really only supposed to last the season until the Olympics had ended. But I found that everybody liked the shirts. They sold phenomenally well, phenomenally quickly. And I ended up making the trousers to go with the shirts, and then jackets to go with the shirts, and a full-on women's collection. And we sewed in Lagos Fashion Week during the 2014, and then we participated in Berlin Fashion Week that following season. We also did a street style festival, which was a festival to celebrate African culture with Hassan Hajjaj, you might know, who is Larash. He's now become a famous photographer and artist. We shut down the street, erected a catwalk, blocked down all of the entering roads. So then we did this 5 years running, and the highlight was the fashion show at the end of the festival. And then the following year, I was appointed head stylist for Africa Fashion Week London. So you can see the trajectory there. I've been very involved and engaged in the African diaspora market, and celebrating our culture within a small culture in London. Next slide, please. So this is the front of my shop, Soboye. These are the things that we've done, and we really take pride in our windows. We've redecorated the shop pretty much every 2 years, and we work collaboratively with the Winchester School of Art. And if you see, that's a window of their knitwear designers. Their second year knitwear produced a collection inspired by Africa, and we've been doing that for the last 5 years, working with their knitwear designers. And they recently, most recently, collaborated with me on the my own solo show, which took place this summer. And I worked with all their students, and they made a knitted Afro-kimono for that show. So that went down really well. And this is all the mix of stuff that I do within the shop. And then the left-hand bottom corner, that white interior is what it looks like inside the shop. That's my retail experience. That's my retail offering. Next slide, please. And that's a bit more of what it looks like inside. And I've been talking about fostering good partnerships. And basically, for me, collaborations, good working relationships is all what it's about. I love meeting people. I'm a people person. Anyone that comes to meet me in my shop will attest to that. And it's about good vibes within the shop, creating a great shopping experience, good visual merchandising, but all from a kind of an African / Afrofuturist perspective. Go forward, please. Go forward again. Go forward. Yeah, and then we do interiors as well. And I spent 5 years out of the fashion industry. I can say I got kind of burnt out and needed a break and a new change of scenery. So for those 5 years, I made cushions, curtains, soft furnishings, bedding. First of all, it was a way of dressing sets, and then it took off on its own merit. And I ended up in pretty much every interiors magazine there was. I still do a little bit of interiors, but not as much as I did do. But hopefully we can get that sorted out at some point again in the future, and relaunch with Soboye Interiors, or Soboye Home, that's what I'm going to call it. Next, please. We've done pop-up shops around London. This one was in Dalston. We've done them in Redchurch Street and in various different places. And we're looking at somewhere in Paris to start a pop-up shop. And we want to try and get to Paris at least once a year on a pop-up basis to kind of launch a brand there. and looking at the Essence Fest as well to do a pop-up event there. So basically trying to find a way to reach newer markets. Next slide, please. So when you're getting into business, the point that I've had to look at and study for my business is how to make my style distinctive, how to stand out in a crowded market. So I've been developing my own USP, which is using the African print, but with a modern tailoring, with a Western sensibility. So using modern styles, but using the print as the message. So if you're going to start a fashion business, you've got to get yourself a good pattern maker. They're invaluable, and a good sample machinist. These days, we all try to be sustainable and ethical, and I've been doing that since day dot. For me, it's not a thing because it's how we do things in Africa anyway. It's how it's always been done. So it's something that we've always held by. We've not sung and danced about it because it's just what we do. We try and have the highest quality of photography, which is very important in getting the visual message across. And we're careful about budgets, which is how we've managed to stay afloat. We spend as little as we can to get the maximum out of our pound, and we do as much marketing as we can with the budgets that we've got. So participating in different fairs and having a confidence in our brand, knowing that we do a great product, we have a great service, and that's always taken us to where we need to go. And next slide, please. We've done fashion shows in Nigeria, as I've said. We've done fashion shows in Lagos. We've done fashion shows in South Africa, fashion shows in Berlin, and fashion shows in Gambia. So again, working on that. So that, yes, if you can see, these are the fashion shows we've done. That's in Berlin, and this is Africa Fashion Week London, and also the Street Style Festival. These are all the shows that we have participated in. This was the biggest one in Berlin. Then we've got to working on lookbooks. What we've tried to do, we've shown that it's an African print. The question that keeps being asked is, from a white perspective, can I wear this? I'm a white person. Can I wear African print? Is it cultural appropriation? And I've told, 90% of my customers are white, and I've told them you're actually doing cultural appreciation, not appropriation. So that's been a great thing. So in my lookbooks, I always try to use Caucasian white models to show that it can work on your skin tone as well. So if you go through, you'll see in the lookbook. So go next slide. So yes, so I've shown it on a mixture and different variety of diverse models to show the ability of the collections, to show how it works on a lot of different people. My good friend Dennis there. And for this lookbook, I chose the whitest, palest, blondest models I could find to show that, yes, you don't have to have a tan skin or dark skin for it to look good on you. So that was what this was about. Yeah. And that's my Ashanti collection, celebrating Ghanaian culture and the Ashanti tribe. And this is some editorial showing you how good it looks in pictures. Yeah, and that was part of our Street Style Festival and some fashion films that we've done for our brand. African Fashion Week. So that, I think if you press on those links, they get you something. So when I do Soboye, I started it as a brand to find clothes for myself that I like, that express my personality. And this picture is taken of me unknowingly from Pitti Uomo, which is in Italy, and it ended up in Italian Vogue. That's how I got to see the picture. I tend to wear my own clothes a lot, and a bit like Oswald Boateng, the best brand ambassador for your brand usually is you. And so I've worn it a lot, and it gets noticed a lot, and it's actually helped me to do sales. And if you see there, you can see how I wear it. I celebrate in it in every different way. The middle picture is in a book about African print, and the picture to the far right with the umbrella was taken by oh God, her name's gone to me, but it was in a dandy style exhibition in Brighton, and it was in her book as well.
Zara Sam Shavari.
Thank you, Elliott. On the tip of my tongue. And yeah, so the couple of those pictures in Lagos. So you can see I really live and breathe and eat my brand. So it's what I'm talking about. Seize the day. Be open to promotional opportunities. Be quick to respond to a call to action, and always try and leave a memorable impression, which I try and do wherever I go. Dress to impress, but don't go overboard, and keep in touch with the contacts that you make. So if you make a contact, follow up, let them know what you're doing, keep up to date with what you're doing, and let everyone know that you're launching a new product line or a new style, and that really stands us down. And you'll find that brands do want to know what you're up to, keep in touch with what you're doing, and they want to be part of your development, part of your growth, and part of your journey too. So keep people informed. Oh, celebrity endorsement. Okay. I've never really been one for this, to be honest. Harris and I just mentioned Anthony Anderson. And I've just done a Africa Fashion Week London 2022, dressing Anthony Anderson. To be honest, I didn't actually know who he was before I dressed him, but shouldn't have, oops. But I did. But Nile Rodgers, he has 10 of my suits. He's about to get another 10. He loves that. PP Arnold, who back here, sorry, go back one, sorry, back to Nile Rodgers. Now he's just contacted me again for another 10 suits. So I worked with Karen Binns on that. She introduced me to him, and she's been loyal in supporting my brand. And there he is meeting RuPaul. The second picture is in the National Portrait Gallery. He's wearing the trousers to a suit. And I saw him wearing the jacket to that Madonna party recently. So, yes, he does love to wear Soboye. Next slide, please. There he is meeting President Clinton, Burna Boy, and the right blue suit was for the launch of Strictly Come Dancing. So, yes, you can see he's a very big fan and lover of Soboye. Ironically, he's only got like one style, but in 10 different prints. The double-breasted one with a different colour, but we'll try and introduce him to some more styles this season. Next slide, please, is PP Arnold. She's a singer from the 60s, used to be with the Rolling Stones, an original iCat, and I've been dressing her for the last 7 years. So that's her and her concert gear. And yeah, this is Simon Anthony Roden. Not as big a star as the others, but he's currently in Hamilton, which I've not yet seen, but I'm about to see. He was Lola in Kinky Boots, and also in the colour purple. He's a big fan too. Oh, in fact, he's got that suit on as well. Megan O'Malley, who's also known as Karen in Will and Grace. She's a big fan. She comes into the shop. I didn't actually recognise her because she looked so different from her character, but I recognised the voice as soon as she spoke. And I said, "You sound familiar. Why do I know that voice?" And then she told me, and I just was like in laughter. I couldn't believe it was her in my shop, but she's a big fan. She comes every year. She's in London. And next one, who's that? John Boyega, who you might know. He's apparently in the Woman King. That Woman King again? Okay. And Ovi from Love Island, Will I Am, and Colin Firth has one of my bow ties. And that's me at the Burberry party. I'm living it up with Bella Hadid and, oh God, who's that one? Joan Smalls. Next slide, please. Andy Polaris from Animal Nightlife. Do you know him, Harris? Yeah. He's a good friend of mine. He's a really good guy to know. And he looks great in the suits. I recently dressed Grace Jones for the Meltdown Festival. It's not in the slides, but she's also a fan now, and I'm also a bigger fan. Kelly Rowland. I even managed to get Joe McCorbin in one of my jackets.
Check you out.
It didn't get him to win the election, but we tried. Brenda Emanis and Lem Sisse. Vernon's a friend who's now moved to LA. He's doing big things up there. Next slide, please.
I don't want to cut you, Samson, because you've got a brilliant presentation, but we are running short on time. So do you want to give any anecdotes or anything to sum up in addition to the great insights you've already given to your work and practice?
Be true to yourself. No matter where you're from, what your upbringing, what your limitations are, just do you. Find your unique selling point. Find your voice and use that only. Don't try and be somebody else. Don't try and imitate somebody else. There is room and space in this planet for who you are. Individuality has never been more celebrated in a time such as now. So do you, and be the best you can be. Be the best version of you, and find allies that support what you're doing, that celebrate what you're doing, and live each day like it's your last. Don't ever put off tomorrow what you can do today. I've learned that at my great expense, and so always try and be one step ahead of yourself too. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for your patience. Thank you, Jessica, for sharing the slides, and great to be with you all.
Amazing. Thank you, Samson. And so you were able to follow Lorraine, different narrative, but equally as arresting and powerful and content rich. So yeah, thank you. I'm now going to share, as we said earlier, a little snippet of some of the projects that I've worked on, just to give a taster. I'm not sure how much time we'll have for questions, but what I was thinking we could do is, if people wish to send in questions, then they can, I'm sure both Samson and Lorraine will be happy to answer those questions at a separate point. I know that I will. My short intro to some of my work and how that references masculinities and black masculinities, entitled Act Like a Waste Man. It's half a line from a Skepta song called That's Not Me. On the left, you've got Charlie Chaplin, and on the right, that's Clint Eastwood. Not the Charlie Chaplin that most of you know, or the Clint Eastwood that you know, but those are both reggae singers. And they were loose family friends that I happened to meet when I was probably about 7 or 8. They were over in London for a couple of gigs. And my family hails from Jamaica. And I don't know if it was at this point, but referencing further on from this point, it was seeing the way in which Jamaican men would embody different kinds of masculinity and different kind of referencing in the way that they would not ever be ashamed to be who they were. And very much was it about their existence was in their stance, their attitude, their poise, and their just general demeanor and communication. And so from a young age, I was influenced and surrounded by that as a personal and local iconography and a point of reference that would hail back to where my parents were from, which followed on as I started to get older. I was never particularly into reggae in my formative years, not till my 20s that I started to take it a bit more seriously. But there was this film, top left, which is the 4 guys standing there, which is a film called Rockers, one of my favorite films, one of my favorite music documentaries. And everything about Jamaican culture is about stance, it's about attitude. Someone could be wearing, see 2 of the guys are wearing woolly hats. It's summer all year round, but actually they still look cool. They still are themselves, and they're still able to identify and reference and have a sense of being. That everyone needs to be individual. As a child growing up, the one thing my mum always used to instill in me is that you have to be an individual. You're never allowed to follow the crowd. So I couldn't do what any of my peers were doing, any of my school friends, any family. I was always very much you have to be you. You cannot emulate anyone else. And these other images here are of dancehall artist Ninja Man. And the idea of, when I think about masculinities, and partly why I put these images in, as much as I look at these and have been very influenced and respond to it, I think about the masculinity show that is on at the V&A currently, and I think some of the things that were missed from it were certain aspects of dancehall culture, of hip hop culture, which is slightly touched upon in the book, but the idea of what masculinity looks like from other cultures and other narratives was kind of overlooked. But these were the ideas, the ideals, and the references that I saw growing up, which then allowed me to be able to present and think about the way that I would do things in my way, which would mean that I didn't have to follow my, as I said, follow my peers. This is an exhibition which we held at Somerset House in 2014. This was Return of the Rude Boy. This is a project that I curated and created with the photographer and filmmaker Dean Chalkley. And the term rude boy hails back to Jamaica in the 1950s. Samson was also immortalized in this exhibition. It was a 10-week show at Somerset House, and it became their summer show. And it was looking at different people who embodied the spirit of what it meant to be a rude boy. On the left, the gentleman there, his name slips me at the moment, Terry Ellis, standing there. Terry doesn't need to have a walking stick or a cane, but that suits his look and suits how he would express himself on a day-to-day basis. And it's that idea of nothing is too special, nothing's too out of reach, nothing cannot be used for you to be able to express what your identity might mean. And therefore, what does masculinity mean? It isn't something that you ever grew up thinking about. It was always around you, but there was always that exploration within Jamaican culture that actually it can be whatever you want it to be, and no one can tell you any different. And if anything, the more outlandish or outrageous you can be, a bit like Ninja Man, the better, because the more you stand out and the more you engage, only further enhances who you are. And I've followed some of those sensibilities and ideals into my practice and the projects that I do, be they commercial or artistic, and sometimes those are obviously both the same things. This is 3 images from a catwalk show that I styled and did some design work for in 2015 for the designer Takeo Kikuchi. And the inspiration for the show was Rude Boy. It was meant to be a bit DIY, a bit punk, celebrating everything British, but from my perspective. And it was a year after we had done Return of the Rude Boy, so we took references from that and then mixed those things up. So there's crowns that are um, all over Paulie's shoulder, or the model in the middle. We created this Malay of these gold masks that we put all over his face, a bit more punk. And there's that point where Paulie's shorts are rolled up a certain way, he's got the bow on, and there's that point where we're playing with identity, we're playing with reference, we're playing with attitude, and it's about swagger, and it's about defiance, and it's about being able to express who you are, an understanding of tailoring, an understanding of referencing, but an understanding that actually, no one's going to mess with you. This is who you are in whichever guise, but then also riffing off of that tailoring narrative at the same time. And then also a few art moments thrown in. So there's that red case as a reference to the artist Fontana, which we painted up and then slashed in the style of Fontana canvases. This is essentially where I got the title from. I was commissioned to create a shoot for the Photographers Gallery in one of their catalogues a few years ago. And the title of this piece and of this shoot was Act Like a Waste Man, That's Not Me. And again, coming from that Skepta song. And the idea that as a Black male, you're very often pigeonholed in maybe similar ways in which Lorraine was talking about earlier. The idea that from an identity perspective, you're often seen as quite one-dimensional or at most two. world in terms of how you can express yourself and how you can be. And so this was a shoot to be able to use graffiti, use body painting, use African references along with some Middle Eastern references to be able to explore some different Black experiences. We shot it in Shoreditch. In fact, it's on the same. We shot this on the same street where Samson shop is. Those billboards were nearly opposite where Samson shop is. And it's that idea that actually we can be whoever we want to be. We can play with the references however we want to play with them. No one can't tell us what it should be, we should look like to be defined as Black men, or what masculinity should mean. I'm very much taking on board so much stuff that comes out in the media, and therefore they will reference a lot around Black masculinity, maybe around the idea of what certain people maybe listen to trap music might wear head to toe in Black tracksuits and Black Reebok or Nike Air Force Ones. And this was about exploring other ideology. And there we've got the quotation marks painted on the sides of Bevan's head next to the fez. And there he is again with that piece that we picked up from the Congo, and then mixing all the different references in and the experience of different Black male experiences in London when your heritage comes from a place where actually the definitions of what a sense of style or a sense of dress should be aren't based on European ideals. So there's the oversized hoodie, which could be seen as some form of my head's gone, some of an extended form of daishiki without any form of print. The idea of the trouser length and that mishmash of prints and colours and block referencing, and they're not following anyone's codes except our own in the way that we would put it together. And finally, going back to the idea of original referencing, and the image on the right, there's what looks like a Mexican style hat, which I found at one of my many vintage fair trips. And I just felt in love with the hat and knew that I needed to use it at some point. And then it was some months later when doing some archive research for something else that it was the exact same hat which was used on this reggae sleeve for the band Culture in the early 80s. And that point where whether those references have gone in intentionally or subliminally, that idea where that point of referencing that comes back to a stance, comes back to a point of view where what does masculinity mean? What do these references mean? How can we incorporate them? And how can we define and own our own space without anyone telling us anything other than actually well done or kind of keep moving? So yeah, that's act like a waste man. That's not me. Thank you. So we've just got time for a couple of questions before we totally run out of time.
Can I just say I love that, Harris? Well done. Thank you. I loved it.
Thank you. No, thank you both of you. It's been great sharing the space with you and being able to hear what both of you have been up to, and I know snippets, but now a bit more of a deep dive in some of what you do. Lorraine, I just wanted to ask, when doing your research, what kind of backlash, if any, did you face? Because Birth of a Nation is one of those films that should have shut down society from day one, but obviously is still used and referenced, which has a turgid, heinous past. But was there any backlash when you were?
When I first encountered it, because I didn't know its history.
Okay.
Because we weren't shown its history, we weren't allowed access to it. It wasn't until I was doing this piece of research that I realized just how controversial it was. So they hid that very nicely in my degree in the way that they edited it so that you couldn't quite see the controversy. But now I don't think it's so much Birth of a Nation itself that is the issue, because I think of it as a film of its time. It's
Okay.
over 100 years old. What I think is the issue is the fact that even our masculinities work that the three of us are doing are still influenced by the images and the stereotypes that came from that. because actually what the three of us are doing is we're kind of pushing the boundaries of what's considered normal for Black masculinities. But that's only because it's set within the context of Western society and the images from Birth of a Nation. So it's the fact that it's trickled down for centuries, for the century, and also because most filmmakers who are white, who are writing for Black people, don't even know that they're perpetuating the racism that came from Birth of a Nation. So it's a real challenge.
That's really interesting, and I know we could probably go off on that for days, not even minutes, but I know we don't even have minutes left. So, Samson, the point for me, what was really interesting, you used the term diverse models, and what was amazing about that is you were talking about diversity in terms of models, but you were looking at using white models. The term diversity is a word that I kind of shy away from, because to me, diverse is often only referenced in the context of an avoidance of anything but white. Therefore, that makes it diverse. Whereas it's the first time I've ever heard it used in a sense where you said, I'm going to have diversity, and then you showed a series of white models. So that for me is kind of like, oh, wow, this is,
yeah, I mean, I can see it now. You've mentioned it, but I've never seen it as a term that's, because I dress myself every time I go out. I'm always get stopped or commented. People bib their horns when they see me in the grabs attention, and I carry it off with aplomb, and I've got the confidence to it. So, and I know that when white people see it, it's kind of like they love and appreciate it, but they think they're not celebrating. They don't want to look like they're trying to take the mickey out of Black culture. So when I say diverse, I mean it's because, like, if we look at a world population, white people are the minority, right? So I have always championed Black models. When I was a stylist, I'd always go into agencies and disrupt them, say, where are your Black models? Where are they? Why are they working? I'd always make friends with the Black models. I always use them in my shoes. And so it's even when I'm looking at model boards, it's the Black ones I'm attracted to most. And so when I've just done my recent show, I did I wanted to have one or two white models in it. I was asked to pay double what I was paying my Black models. And I said, I don't want to pay your white models double what I'm paying the Black models. They have to do it for the same price. Models talk. Can you imagine the mutiny if they found out that the white model was being paid double? So I said, I'll take your white model at this price. If she doesn't want to do it for that, we can't use her. I don't mind working with just all Black faces in my show. But just out of courtesy to the country I'm in, we will want some white models and to show the diversity of it. So that was why, I wanted them, just to show it can be used on different people.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Thank you both for joining me. We've now reached the end of our time. Thank you to anyone and everyone who gets the chance to be able to watch this. But this has been Samson, Soboye, Lorraine, Henry King, and myself, Harris Elliott, Masculinities and People of Colour for the Face Summit 2022. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, guys. And can't wait to meet you all in person again soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.